evening, everybody. Welcome to our show. Eric, good to see you again. Rosanna is on vacation. She'll be back next week, I think. Anita and Scott, good morning. A lot to talk
Morning.
about today. We were in D.C. last Saturday for the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. Scott, where are you going? ICE continues to its war on workers. There's a lot ongoing immigration crisis in this country on the southern border. And then in 2 weeks or so, there's going to be a big, we hope, climate march here in New York. And we'll be talking about that. And then our conclusion, Labor Day is coming up on Monday. We're lucky, I guess, as a result of the Cold War. We got two Labor Days, May Day and then the beginning of September, which was
One of them
put
we
up
even
as
get a day off for.
May Day. I'm sorry?
One of them we even get a day
Okay.
off for.
Yeah. So
Not everybody.
let's get started. I'm sorry?
I just said not everybody because I worked on Labor Day throughout my career. Denison didn't close. My university did not close on Labor Day. We started. That was our first day of class.
Okay, well, at the end of the show, you can complain as much as you want. Let's get
Okay,
started. Eric, last Saturday, we were in D.C. at the March on Washington. How was it?
It was a wonderful march. This was the 60th anniversary march of the 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And the march was very explicitly not a commemoration, but a continuation of the struggles that were that brought so many people together in 1963 and then again in 2023. While it wasn't as big as the 1963 one, which had over 250,000 people, this one I've seen estimates between 25 and 40,000 people. It was a lot of people, and it was um, spirited. So there were people walking around with signs that said "Jobs and freedom, now," and peace and freedom. I saw those kinds of signs. And what really strikes one is how the struggles are continuing. And they're the same struggles that we were protesting in 1963. And I happened to have been there as a 7-year-old in 1963. So I was very happy to still be here for this 60th anniversary. There were a lot of calls for jobs and freedom now. And I think that that's really important to remember that the demand for jobs and for equality of pay was central to the 1963 demands, and is still central today. Al Sharpton said that the dreamers are in Washington, D.C., and the schemers are being booked in Atlanta at the Fulton County Jail. And I think that in a shorthand, captures some of what's going on today in the United States. That there's this upsurge of activity demanding jobs, equality, and recognition for the LGBTQ communities, and similar kinds of struggles. And the extremist GOP is doing everything they can to undermine that. Martin
They
Luther
certainly
King,
are.
yeah,
They certainly are. Scott, you were at the march. How'd you like it?
I thought it was great. I was there with my wife and our daughter, and also my nephew who's 14. And it was a really it was a terrific thing to see, and also the message of kind of unity was really inspiring. So there was the the unity of labor and the African American freedom movement was kind of front and center, but there was also an enormous focus on unity between the African American freedom struggle and the struggle for LGBTQ equality, and also the struggle against anti-Semitism, which, as we know, as the fascist threat has grown in the United States, anti-Semitism perpetrated by these right-wing extremists has been on the rise as well.
Anita, I understand you listened to the march online. You spent 5 hours sitting by your computer. You need a order of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn medal to pin on for doing that. What struck you most about the march?
Well, I agree with Scott. The unity of the struggles, the various struggles, also women's reproductive rights came into play as well. That was a demand on the part of a lot of people, and of course, not every speaker embraced all of these issues, but just the continuities and the interrelationships among those, and the recognition that we're all in one struggle was really impressive to me. And I mean, just some of the people that I'd like to go back to. By the way, in terms of 5 hours, you can speed up videos that you see on just a secret for you there. But I really wanted to go back to some of the people like the hip hop mogul Yearwood, the woman who was speaking from an organization called In Her Own Voice, which is a Black women's reproductive rights organization, the Japanese Americans Citizens League. I thought he had something to say. You know, a sister from the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Just all of these various speakers that I would not have been exposed to had I not been able to watch that whole video. And it was just excellent, and just seeing the unity of spirit. They were not only commemorating but continuing as the theme went. They were demanding a lot of attention to African American history, given what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. And then there were also outrage over the efforts of Edward Bloom, who evidently hasn't stopped with trying to destroy affirmative action in higher education, but also is going after, set-asides for minority contracts and that kind of thing. So there was just a lot of unity, but also, contemporary struggles that we're dealing with right now. And labor also came in, was really well represented with Fred Redmond and Liz Schuler, but also the teachers unions. It's just, all around, there were just a lot of it was just so many different speakers, and really showing the unity of the struggle.
Yes, you're right. Well, what struck me was that, if there was one speaker representing the LGBTQ community, there were 12.
Mhm.
The same thing was true with the Jewish community. But it didn't stop there. There was an attempt to invite the participation of Latinos and Asians and the labor movement and so on and so forth. Of course, not everybody was present, and there were key parts of the democratic and civil rights movement that weren't there, and that I think was a weakness. And there were some issues that Martin Luther King paid attention to back in the day that weren't highlighted at the march, Eric. Even though from the crowd there were signs for peace, I didn't hear many calls for addressing that issue and the relationship between the struggle for civil rights and democracy at home with the struggle for the same abroad. Or did I miss something, Eric?
I didn't hear it from the podium, and I haven't finished watching all of the remarks yet. But I think that certainly among the people who were there was a strong sense of the need to win peace, and the signs that they were carrying linked peace and jobs and peace and freedom. So I think that is definitely on the agenda.
And not just in the United States, but all over the world. You know, there are still big struggles for democracy, self-determination, justice all over the planet. And that goes from countries in Latin America to countries on the African continent. You see, there's been a lot of military developments, revolutions in the western part of the continent against French colonial, neo-colonial rule. There's the issue of Palestine and the rights of the Palestinian people to their own state, so on and so forth, that remain to be addressed. And so long as there's $1 trillion plus being spent on the U.S. military, so long as there are 130 U.S. bases strung around the world, you know, it's difficult for us to be free, both domestically, to say nothing of people around the world. And back home, they're militarizing police departments and so on and so forth. And that too is a big issue, Scott. They're militarizing the border of the United States. And that too is a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and a couple of reports came out this week on just what this war on immigrants is costing the American people in terms of our basic civil liberties. In fact, um, one report that came out was, I believe, from the ACLU that the California Department of Corrections, so it forwards lists of people it takes in who are candidates for deportation. And on those lists, it includes people whom it knows to be American citizens. Is my audio coming through clearly?
Yeah.
Seemed like I
Yes.
have a lag there.
You're
Okay.
Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, so there's that. And the other report that came out from the Los Angeles Times was that ICE has, through partnerships with both state agencies and private, mostly telecommunications firms, it now has a database with information on the whereabouts of three rather, in every four Americans, which is, a domestic spying program that that passes, even the excesses that we saw during the George W. Bush presidency. So this really, if we ever needed, a concrete demonstration that an attack on immigrants is an attack on freedom generally, and especially an attack on working class people, that's it.
Anita, there was also an important article in the PW this week written by some of the congressmen who were working in the Political Action Department's Immigration Subcommittee, which talked about Operation Lone Star in Texas, where the governor, Abbott, is putting orange buoys to keep afloat circular saw blades to prevent migrants from uh, coming across the border. And children are being caught up in these buoys, and women and men, mangled and tangled in these. It's a cruel and unusual punishment and treatment of, I mean, almost unspeakable. No.
It's outrageous, Joe. And I mean, compared to how it used to be, where people from Mexico would come up to the United States and cross the border and work for the season and then go back with their families. Well, that ended when they, prevented people from going back and forth. But just my own personal opinion, when I read stories like this and hear the GOP candidates want to declare war on Mexico and send the troops down, to fight the cartels, and it's just ridiculous, these efforts that they're going so far, even beyond what our former president went. But I personally would like to see, the GOP is always accusing the Democrats of wanting open borders, and then the Democrats say, "Oh no, we're not." But I'm for open borders. Why can't labor move as easily as capital does? Why didn't Ted Cruz have a problem going to Cancun? He managed to get in and out just fine. So I would like to. I think human needs for everybody would be taken care of so much better if we just let the human race migrate around the world, just like they did for 100,000 years before they invented borders. So that's what I'd like to see. I don't know whether that's our party's position, but that's my own personal opinion.
Eric, there were 500 deaths so far this year, migrant deaths crossing the border, compared to 853 last year. This is a humanitarian crisis, and yet still, and I gotta say, the Biden administration hasn't taken a good position on this. In fact, they've made it more difficult for migrants to come into the country. In some ways, duplicating the Trumpian policy. For example, on the issue of asylum, you can't cross the border and ask for asylum now. You have to do it from a second country or your primary country, or you have to do it by phone or computer. A lot of these people don't have phones and computers, Eric.
A lot of these people are struggling for their lives, and I think that we have to see the solidarity that underlies the struggles here in the United States and in Mexico, and understand that while there's an arbitrary border there, it's the same struggles against the same forces of capitalism that are destroying agriculture in Mexico, that are contributing to the existence of the drug cartels, and it's the U.S. Policies that keep undermining democracy and democratic power for workers in Mexico. I personally agree with Anita. I'm for open borders, and I think that we have to look for ties wherever we can between organized labor here in the United States and working people in Mexico.
And just returning to the theme of the March on Washington, the struggle for immigrant rights is a basic civil rights issue, Anita. I mean, it's, you can't really separate those two issues. And in many parts of the country, like, for example, in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, they recently passed a bill giving migrants the right to vote. Big deal, no?
Mm-hmm. That is great. I think we have efforts in other states in the Midwest to prevent that from happening. I think I didn't research this, but I think in Ohio we have a rule again, a law statewide against letting immigrants vote, because I think in Yellow Springs, as you know, Yellow Springs is a hotbed of liberalism in Ohio. They did pass a law that immigrants within the city limits could vote on city issues. So I think that I think again you see two different parts of the country moving in different ways on this issue. But I also wanted to mention the buoys in Texas have their counterparts in Europe in Greece, where there are people setting wildfires, and people have migrants have perished in these blazes that are deliberately set to rein them in. So I mean, it's just a war on moving migrants, and especially climate migrants. It's going to be that's our next topic, but I won't go there. But it's just a problem that is going to be increasing year after year.
Well, it's a good lead in, because one of the problems, Scott, with those 500 deaths on the U.S. Mexico border came about because of heat exhaustion, heat strokes, because of the excessive heat that's taking place in the south and the southwest of this country. I mean, I think it was in Phoenix they had 31 days, 3-1, in excess of 110 degrees. And we got some good comrades out there in Phoenix and in Tucson. Shout out to you. We were thinking about you during those 31 days. God, it's, I mean,
It,
uh, go
and
ahead.
and what, you know, I heard a saying was, I can't remember who, originally said it, but there's there's no such thing as a natural disaster. There are natural events with disastrous consequences because of the policies that that governments pursue, and the policy of the U.S. ruling class, and especially the extreme right, in response to this heat, has been atrocious and absolutely inhumane. So I'm not sure if they're still in effect, but there were laws in Arizona that criminalized giving water to migrants. Um, I imagine Texas has similar policies. The state of Texas just passed a law preventing cities from mandating water breaks for workers. Like, just deliberately uh, compounding the effects of the heat, turning it into a humanitarian crisis. And as all of these crises deepen, the climate crisis, economic crises, the political crisis of the fascist threat, as these deepen, the need for militant mass movements in defense of people's basic well-being just becomes more and more important.
It becomes more and more apparent and more imperative. But Anita, nothing's going to change unless there's push from below. And on the 17th of this month, here in New York City, there's a big march taking place around the issue of climate change um, and fossil fuels, calling for an end to the use of fossil fuels and the need to develop renewable sources of energy. You got a good group coming from Ohio yet?
I hope so. We're working on that. I would really want to take a road trip to New York for that march, because I think I work in Columbus with a lot of young people, and they are fired up about the climate issue. And this is yes, it's people coming up from below. It's the masses from below, but it's also to try to affect change at the highest levels, and that is the UN climate summit is taking place, and that's why the march is taking place when it is. And I think I hope we get a good crowd there, and I know people are really concerned about this issue. And it's so clear from all of the crises that we have going on in the world right now. Every week there's another disaster, and Scott's right. There are no natural disasters but there are these human-made disasters week after week. And we know what will end it. It's not recycling your milk bottle. It's going after the extraction industries. And as the sign with Bernie Sanders' sign said, keep it in the ground.
Bernie Sanders, Eric, is calling for the U.S. military and for to cut spending 10%. He says that the United States and China must cut their military spending 10%. What do you think about that?
Well, I think 10% of cutting, I think that cutting the U.S. military budget 10% would be a good start. I would aim for more like 95% and transferring that money to the human needs of the people of the United States. However, I think it's wrong for us to even talk about the Chinese military budget when it is so much smaller than the U.S. military budget, and China is not doesn't have hundreds of military installations around the world. It's a totally different thing. And it's a totally different beast or a totally different policy that China has been pursuing than the imperialist policies of the United States. And I think that that has to be recognized. And I think that a pox on both your houses kind of approach that lumps China and the United States together is wrong. I think that we here in the United States have a strong and demanding imperative to the rest of the world and to our own working people to shrink the military budget and close the military installations, bring our troops home.
Scott, people can go to endfossilfuels.us and check out the organizations that are preparing for that march. And we hope to have a big delegation. We had a delegation down in D.C. We had about 25 people. We never ended up marching. It got too hot. We were trying to hold out till 2, 3 o'clock, and our producer was there. Thank you for coming, showing up with Gus, your puppy. We appreciated that. But we want to have an even bigger delegation here in New York City on the 17th. So come one, come all. Come from Indiana, come from Ohio, come from Michigan, Detroit, we want to see you. Come from Chicago, South Side, West Side. Come from Philly, we want to see Philly. DC, we hope you're going to be there. Connecticut. What about upstate New York, Scott? Your club in Ithaca?
Yeah, we talked about it in our meeting last night. We're planning to send some people. Not sure how many yet, but I wanted to tell Anita. Corey and I live on I-86, a little more than halfway between Cleveland and New York. So if you need a stopping point on that road trip, we'd love to put the Ohio comrades up on the way. So yeah, I think it's going to be big, and it needs to be big. It needs to be big. This is the one thing that is truly too big to be allowed to fail is, the ability of humanity to continue living on this planet.
Absolutely, and that's increasingly what's at stake. And we hope that there's not a environmental person-made disaster before, because then sometimes shit just has to, pardon my language, just go crazy. Some tragedy has to happen before people act. A war has to break out. Disease a pandemic has to start before you take measures to stop something that could have been preventable from Jump Street. I don't know what it is in our nature that makes that happen. But whatever it is, it definitely needs to change. Come one, come all, New York City on the 17th. Write to us at CPUSA at cpusa.org. Look for us in the mail. We'll be sending out a blast later. We're going to have a sign-up sheet. We want to have a big, bad, and bodacious delegate. That's my new term.
Yep.
That's my alliteration, the 3 B's. Big, bad, bodacious Communist Party delegation here in New York City on the 17th. Bring your banners, bring your signs, bring your bodies. Banners, bodies, there's no B that goes with the signage. So, or at least if there is, I can't think of it at the moment. And that'll be a good way for us to begin celebrating the birthday of the Communist Party USA, which is today, September 1st. Eric, give me three things that stand out in I don't know, what is this, the 103rd, the 104th birthday? Does anybody know? Anita, you sent me a note about it.
104.
It's
It's
104 years,
104.
not quite as old as B. Lumpkin, but B, if you're watching, we're racing to catch up with you. I know we'll never make it, but it's a good race. Eric, three things that stand out in the history of the party, in your opinion.
Struggle, unity, and consistency. We have been fighting for uh, for people's rights for all these years, and we're going to keep going.
Okay. Anita, three things that stand out for you in the history of the Communist Party.
Perseverance and audacity. And let's see, I think I'll stick with the two right there. I
I'm gonna
can't
come back to you
outdo
because
Eric.
I'm looking for events. Scott, three events, things that stand out for you in the history of the Communist Party.
Well, let's see. Um, the bringing together of labor and racial justice organizations, really kind of from the beginning, from the 20s and 30s. The process of rebuilding and reemergence after the attack on the party under on McCarthyism and in the 1950s, and just maybe because I was there, the 2019 convention of the party, which I think was a spectacular show of unity and really highlighted the depth of our commitment to the struggle for democracy and socialism. So yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question. Three events. I'm not sure.
All right, I'm gonna give you another chance. Three things that stand out for me. Thing number one, Little Steel Strike, Youngstown, Ohio, 1937. And one of the reasons it stands out for me because my grandma, Pauline Taylor, was on the picket line during that strike. She's 100%. She was a young woman back then. Probably wasn't, she was in her late 30s, 36, 37 years old, and on the picket line, She came out of a tradition of coal miners back in Alabama. So first thing, Little Steel Strike and the role of the party, Gus Hall and others. And by the way, if you watch that movie, what's the name of that movie with Oppenheimer? They talk about Youngstown and the organization of basic industry there. I think Oppenheimer's wife was a member of the party way back when. So that's the first thing that stands out for me in the history of the party. The second thing that stands out was the election of a communist to student government at University of Massachusetts, Amherst, in the early 1980s. Actually, it wasn't the early 80s. It was 86 or 87. It was made the front page of the New York Times back then. Remember, the Cold War was still blowing below zero, and it was a big, big breakthrough for us. And while I'm on the subject of the YCL, another big thing was the recreation, the reestablishment of the YCL way back when in the 80s. I think it was maybe 2 years before, 3 years before. We had that convention in Cleveland, Ohio, followed up by a convention in New York City. And that in many ways laid the basis for the future growth of the party through this day. There have been zigs and zags and mistakes and lapses made, but nevertheless, we're rebuilding our youth movement. We want to give a shout out in particular to our communist students who are building YCL chapters and campuses across the country. 3 in Kentucky, 3 or 4 in DC, and that's a wonderful thing. Eric, I will give you a shot for one more event that stands out in the history of the party, then you, Anita, and then Scott, and then we're going to bring this show to a close. Eric?
I'm going. So this might be controversial, but I'm going to put the 1963 March on Washington at, on that list because the party played a big role in the period leading up to that, and I'm claiming it.
Good. There's an important article on the role of the left in the civil rights movement, you know, from the 30s all the way through the 60s. A linkage that has been obscured and denied in many, many respects. And we'll be commenting on that more as the time goes on. Anita, one other event that the party stands out for you in the history of the party.
For me, I would say the time that Anna Haas Morgan won her Supreme Court case. Anna Haas Morgan was a Columbus comrade in the 40s, an organizer here in Franklin County, and she was brought up on charges, and it took 9 years, and finally she was exonerated by the Supreme Court, and she's our hero here in Columbus.
And she's your club is named after her, I think. So
Right.
A fitting name for a great fighter. Scott, one more thing in the history of the party that stands out for you.
Let's see. Maybe Elizabeth Gurley Flynn's speech in her Smith Act trial. Joe, you've mentioned it before. It's considered one of the 100 greatest, or has been named anyway by some professional rhetorical organization as one of the 100 greatest speeches in English. But a defense of both the party and of our understanding of democracy and our commitment to the furtherance of democracy. When the Communist Party was being branded as the enemy of democracy, as a party of violent overthrow of the government, of whatever other baseless accusation. She used her time in front of the court, used the attack on her and on the party to set the record straight.
And that does it for us this week. 104 years strong. A happy birthday, Communist Party. And happy Labor Day. Monday, people are going to be at parades, at picnics, eating barbecue, drinking pop or soda, whatever you call it, laying back. Some are going to be on the picket lines. The SAG-AFTRA workers, screenwriters are going to be on the picket lines. UAW workers are going to be preparing for a strike if necessary. A lot of folks are going to be organizing in a lot of different industries, from grocery workers to Starbucks to Amazon workers. We are in solidarity with you. We're going to be on the front lines with you. And so wherever you are, know, if you watch this show, that the Communist Party USA and the YCL stands shoulder to shoulder with you in the fight for working class civil and human rights. Take care, and we'll see you next time on Good Morning Revolution. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay in the fight. Take care, everybody.
Later,
Bye.
comrades.
Bye-bye.